Today's interview is with Rich Munroe. Rich is a cool guy. He lives in Atlanta, Georgia. He talks about how he started working in consumer debt and talked a little bit about that, which was interesting to me. He then went into real estate investing with tax liens. Had some horror stories with that, but all educated him and helped him then go forward and buy some long-term rentals, which he then decided that short-term rentals and the Airbnb model was the way that he wanted to go. So he talks about that, why he likes Airbnb, the way that he does it now, with the help of his lovely wife. So as always, like and subscribe, and then the WWRE podcast, give me a 5-star rating and write me a review if you think it's worthy, which, I'm sure it is. Also, if you would like to get on a call and talk to me about anything real estate related, I love to talk about real estate. I can do it all day long. So if you want some advice, or you want just a sounding board, or you just want an excuse to talk about real estate, wherever you are in your real estate journey, I would love to talk to you, connect with you, hear all about you. And yeah, it's wrestlingwithrealestate.com. There's a link there, or there'll be a link in the description below. So enjoy today's interview. If you're interested in Airbnb, this might be a good one for you.
Hello and welcome to Wrestling with Real Estate, where we look to chokeslam all your real estate problems. I'm your host, former WWE wrestler and now Cirque du Soleil performer, and of course, multifamily real estate investor, Barri Griffiths. Now today we're joined by Rich Munroe.
Thanks for having me today, Barry. I'm looking forward to it.
No problem. So do you want to give us a little bit of insight into what you do and your background?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm based here in Atlanta, Georgia, and I've been down here for a little over 30 years. I'm originally from New York. That's kind of the typical route that folks take to get down into the South is through New York. But I started my entrepreneurial career with consumer debt buying, and so that's kind of back in 2001. Started doing consumer debt buying, which is typically consumer debt, credit card debt, auto. Anything that can be owed to a bank can be bought and sold in the secondary market, and that was kind of the industry that I played in. We unfortunately, like a lot of industries in '08, with the recession, got hit. That industry in particular got slammed because the banks stopped selling their debt because of what was going on with the recession. So it really put that industry kind of out of business for all intents and purposes. However, it allowed me to kind of pivot and focus on tax liens and tax deed purchases, which is kind of what got me into real estate. This is probably about 10 or so years ago. And so I shifted away from the consumer debt buying space, but very similar, buying a delinquent tax lien that's owed to a county or city government that keeps the government going. And then they pass on the same rights to the investor that the county has. So it's kind of a first lien position, allows you to take possession of the property after a certain redemption period. So we did quite a bit of properties in Georgia and in Maryland, around 350 or so. And through that process, kind of really saw the ugly side of real estate, or kind of the bottom of the barrel, so to speak. You've got the hoarders, and you've got properties that have been sitting abandoned for many, many years. And, really most cases are kind of full gut rehab. So it kind of gave us a good introduction from the beginning of what's involved. Most of those properties we sold out to other investors and let them do the rehab. And then we started a rehab business shortly after that as well, here in Georgia, as well as in Chicago with a partnership that we have there. And we did some multifamily, and like most real estate investors, we started looking strategically for that residual cash flow income. It's kind of the end game for a lot of us. And so we started building up a traditional rental portfolio of regular, rentals, where in most cases they were a couple hours of where we lived, but we also had it outsourced to a property manager in most cases. But found it to be very tedious. With the typical, you got to evict somebody right before the holidays, and once you evict them, you got to pretty much do a mini rehab again because they've torn the place up. And so, this was about a little over 3 years ago. We looked at the short-term rental model, and for me, it was like a light bulb going off. You've got the same asset, whether it's a 2, 3, 4, 5 bedroom home, that you're able to generate 2 to 3 times the revenue per month by building kind of a process in place. So we started it to be scalable on purpose in the beginning, and so we started with a couple of units, couple 1 bedrooms, just to kind of learn the process. Within 3 or 4 months, we became super hosts. And I keep saying we, because it is a family business. My wife, Marva, is involved with the business. So I kind of handle the acquisitions and acquiring the properties and the kind of the hospitality side of things, guest communications. And then my wife handles the staging of the property and managing the cleaning operation, which frankly is the hardest part of this business. And so she kind of does a lot of the heavy lifting there. So we very quickly, I think in the beginning, we were adding 1 property per month. Any property that we owned back then that didn't really fit a good short-term rental model, because there are some legislative issues depending on the area, we basically sold those properties just to kind of have short-term rentals be our core focus. And so right now we're right at around 23 properties that we are doing short-term rentals with. And they range the gamut from 1 and 2 bedrooms that might be in a 20 or 30 unit building to 3, 4, 5, 6 bedroom homes that are much larger homes. And so we've kind of got a pretty diverse portfolio. We're in growth mode even during COVID. There's a lot of opportunities in what we're seeing out there right now. And it's kind of a nice fit with multifamily. We've got some recently rehab projects that are kind of 30 units, and we can step in with that developer, partner with them, and take over 10 units. And what I like about this is it's kind of optional. You can do a rental arbitrage, like a master lease structure, where you're basically making the spread between what the monthly expenses are and what you can get in revenue for short-term rentals. Or you can do more of a management style where you can manage the process from start to finish and take a management fee on the cash flow. And so we've got a hybrid of a mixture of the few of those different structures for our investors that we have, besides the properties that we own. So Barry, I know I've been rambling on here. But...
No, that's great. No, that's great. You've had a very interesting career. The tax lien business is something I've heard about, never really been into myself. Was it the reason you got out of that? Was the main reason that you were dealing with like you said, the ugly side of things? Was it not a profitable business?
No, it was very profitable. It's there are some aspects of it that are kind of very difficult to control, simply the court process. So what you think might take 6 or 8 months through the quiet title action to perfect title on the property could very well end up being 12 or 18 months, just because of probate or some different circumstances. You have to service everybody involved that had a lien position on that property. And so for example, in Georgia, the redemption period is 12 months, which means the original property owner can redeem that tax deed back from you plus a 20% penalty within that 12-month window. After 12 months, you can then foreclose the property. Now, you can start the process, right? So that's where potentially it could take another year or a year and a half from that point. So you bought the tax deed a year earlier, but yet it might take another year for you to take title. So it's kind of a slow burn strategy, but as long as you're buying them right, it's definitely, your exit is you're going to get 20% on your money, or you're going to take the property. And if you buy it right, we were usually, in at a lower cost basis to be able to sell it to an investor. And, we're usually at a maybe 35 to 40% of the after repair value, which leaves plenty of room for the profit there for the investor.
Yeah. Not to focus too much on this, because I'm really interested in the short-term rental, but so we always hear about the foreclosure process, but as an individual, right, or as a company, you guys would have to go through the foreclosure process yourself?
Yeah, so I say foreclosure, but technically it's not a foreclosure as in the traditional sense. So in most states, and each state is very different in terms of how it works, but in most states, you a quiet title action to confirm to everybody that you're basically your first position, and you have to kind of do an announcement to everybody that's ever had title to the property that you're about to take possession of it, and you give them like a 30-day notice to respond, And so it's not a traditional foreclosure where it's an auction process. It's basically handled through the court systems and through process servers to get it perfected. And it's just kind of a quiet title action process versus a foreclosure. So it's a little different, and something, like I said, sometimes it takes a lot longer than a foreclosure. So it's just kind of one of those legal things that you have to go through to get it finalized.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm not surprised that maybe you pivoted. It sounds kind of profitable, but kind of very headachy too, right?
Yeah, it's very tedious. And if there's one little thing that goes wrong, it can delay the process, and it's things that you can't control. So you just kind of have to roll with it. And so if you don't have private money patient money behind you, it's very difficult to kind of have that, funnel a lot of stuff through there because of that.
Yeah, yeah. So now you said you guys have obviously transitioned to short-term rentals, and you guys have 23 properties.
Yes.
So what does that portfolio consist of? You mentioned the rental arbitrage model. Do you have any of those in your portfolio, or do you own all of those properties?
Yeah, so it's about a third of them we own, about a third that are rental arbitrage, and then the other third is through management. So we're basically managing the properties for other investors. And what we've found in the Atlanta market, and probably in most markets across the states pre-COVID, the markets were softening a little bit. Now, of course, it's great because the interest rates are low and everybody's able to sell their properties quickly. We're still doing rehabs here and there. So we just went under contract just yesterday, actually, on one of our rehab projects. And it was on MLS for 4 days. We got like 3 offers and did best and final, got a full price offer with no closing costs. So it worked out really good. But back last year in the Atlanta market, it wasn't, especially in the $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 price range for properties. Investors would do these great rehabs, brand new kitchens, open floor plan, and nobody would buy them. So we would step in and basically provide them the option for us to come in and stage the property and right away start cash flowing with short-term rentals. And on like a 5-bedroom house, you could very easily be at $7,000, $8,000, and sometimes $9,000 a month in gross revenue with short-term rentals. And so, it's also kind of an interesting angle where you can basically do a listing, just try to sell it still, but still do short-term rentals in the meantime. So you're still cash flowing and liquidating some numbers on the property instead of it sitting there just not collecting any money for you. So, that's been another thing that we've kind of grown and had that as for a lot of the investors in town as an option.
That's really interesting. I've never heard of that before. So you guys would see a listing or a couple of properties on there that aren't selling in that price range, and you'd find the owner and you'd approach them and say, "Hey guys, we'll do all the work. You guys, we share the profits from there, and we can keep it on the market or whatever until you sell it." And then, wow, that's an interesting model. That's who would say no to that, right? You'd be crazy to.
Yeah, it's especially if it's just sitting there not getting sold, or you're not renting it or anything, right? It's just sitting there empty. So you might as well, get some profitability going with it. And so that's worked out well. And we've found with the multifamily, it's a nice option as well to give you that competitive advantage, whether you're either you're about to sell or you're potentially looking at an acquisition. If you can layer in a master lease strategy with that acquisition, all of a sudden you're at 100% occupancy, by forcing it in there. And not to mention your numbers are going to be potentially 2 to 3 times what it would typically be as a traditional rental. And so strategically, the cash flow starts, spitting off much higher than it traditionally would.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a powerful tool, or powerful strategy, should I say, Interesting. Of the ones the properties you own, what do most of them look like? What does a good Airbnb look like, or short-term rental, I should say, because you've got VRBO as well, right?
Yeah, so we've got, and we've kind of learned through the years what's profitable, what's not, because even on rental arbitrage, if your numbers are too tight, you're basically spinning through all these hoops, and you're basically barely breaking even in some cases. So you have to do your market research. You have to confirm that your expenses aren't going to exceed a certain number, because at the end of the day, there's no guarantee on occupancy. But if you've got a clean slate as a starting point, You don't want to reinvent the wheel. I mean, basically, we've got short-term rentals all over Atlanta Metro, in suburbs, in walkable city areas, near the airport. So you can do this. It doesn't matter the location. Anytime that there's a hotel nearby, you can do short-term rentals and Airbnb. It's become such a popular way to travel. However, if you're starting and you're trying to figure out, well, what's my best starting point? Like we've got 2 units that we started with in the beginning that we've kind of held on over time that have done quite well. And they're in an 8-unit building, and they're across the hall from each other. One's a 1-bedroom, the other one's a 2-bedroom. The building itself was built in like 1920, and was recently updated within probably the last 10 or 15 years. So it's got updates in the apartment, but you can still tell it's the original wood flooring and the tall ceilings and the older architecture. But the fact is where it's located, you can basically walk within a few blocks to the Atlanta Beltline, which is a big popular walking that goes around the perimeter of Atlanta or within the city limits. And a lot of restaurants and bars and shops are kind of along that same area. And so you can get Ubered to that location and be there for a week and not ever have to jump in a car to go anywhere in the Atlanta traffic. So it's just one example. We average about 90% occupancy at those units consistently. The only time that it might drop off is during the holidays, November, December. It's kind of hit or miss. Sometimes it gets busy because people want family members to come in and don't have anywhere to stay. But in other cases, sometimes it's not as busy. So, the occupancy is very seasonal, even in the regular cities. Doesn't have to necessarily be, beachfront to have that seasonality aspect with it. It's still holds true in metro areas as well.
You mentioned earlier about some of these properties where you can get $8,000-9,000 a month. I'm guessing that's just income, right? That's not necessarily profit. Maybe talk a little bit about the numbers. Okay, obviously, a 1-bedroom apartment is going to be different than a 5-bedroom thing, but in terms of costs and what people should expect, because I'm sure people might be interested in Airbnb and they see, okay, I can make this much, or I can bring this much in, I'm going to make this much. But in reality, I'm sure unless you know what you're doing, your numbers are going to be probably way off.
No, that's very true. So, like on the 1-bedroom apartment in our Ponce City Market listing, the market rent on that is about $1,400 a month. And we would, at 90% occupancy, 80-90% occupancy, we're going to gross about $3,000, right? You're going to have your utilities and Wi-Fi as your main monthly expenses. And you're also going to have supplies to replenish. We provide coffee. You have to do the paper towels and toiletries and things like that have to be replenished. So there's an expense there as well. And so you're looking at, you're probably all in at around $1,800 for your expenses. And so your net difference is going to vary between, 1,000 to just below 1,000. 900 to 1,000 is going to be a good month to net. And so, that's a 1-bedroom, obviously like you mentioned, on a 5-bedroom, if your market rents in the 2,000 range or 2,500, the larger homes, it's got a much bigger spread, because you could potentially be, if you just do simple math, if you're doing $300 a night as a nightly rate, which is on the low end, 10 nights, you're at 3,000, right? So you've already pretty much covered your expenses for the month, and anything else that you do above that's going to be pure profit. And so same thing there, though. Obviously, you've got the utilities and Wi-Fi, and it's on a larger home, so it's going to be a little bit higher. So your all-in expenses might be, $2,600, $2,700, and then you'll make the overage. Now, some of the higher homes, higher capacity homes, your occupancy might be 70%, right, or 60%. So when you're looking at the analytics, you kind of have to put your traditional rental model to the left, and just kind of the big moving pieces obviously are the nightly rate and the percentage occupancy. So you might be at a $500 nightly rate, but your occupancy might be at 50%. So you have to account for that difference. And it's going to be, a little bit slightly different depending on the location of the property and so on. One of the things that we found that's been pretty interesting through this process is you tend to want to feel like the ones and two bedrooms are going to be the ones that do great, and that those are the ones with the higher occupancy, and that's what you should focus on. We're finding out that the larger homes, because of the shift in the way people travel now, the 5 and 6 bedroom homes tend to do much better than the 1 or 2 bedrooms. And you've got families that are traveling together, and they're going through the same logical math themselves. If they've got to go get 4 hotel rooms at $200 a night, but they can get this great 5 bedroom home that's got a full kitchen and a backyard and driveway and everything for $350 a night, it makes economical sense for them to do that. And so the more people you can sleep in your short-term rental, typically the bigger the profit's going to be because of that. And and obviously the vacation short-term rental space has been around forever, and there's a reason for that, right? I mean, people are going to pay $2,000 a week to go to be at the beach or across the street from the beach, and so we're starting to have some diversification with our portfolio. And we were actually just down in the Panhandle in Florida a few weeks ago looking at properties, and like I mentioned to you, down in Tampa, St. Pete area, we're looking at gaining some listings down there as well. I'm actually originally from the Caribbean too, so
Really?
we have a 1 bedroom, actually it's a 2 bedroom condo in Montego Bay. We're about to get another one that's a 1 bedroom. So we're right now, of course, with COVID, it's completely shut down there with what's going on from international travel standpoint. But long-term, big picture, we're looking at some of those opportunities to grow the portfolio as well.
Yeah. Well, you touched on it. I was going to ask at some point, but obviously that's the elephant in the room, right? The pandemic. When this first hit, it seemed like short-term rentals were going to be in a lot of trouble, right? Nobody's going to be traveling, everyone's going to be stuck, and it was somewhat the case. But correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know this is just an assumption I'm making, is that now there's been a huge rebound because people don't want to travel internationally, but they're still not working perhaps, and where are you going to go? You get stir crazy in your house and you want something to do. So I'm sure there's been a big rebound in short-term rentals recently. Would that be true?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen obviously mid-March when the restrictions got put in place, anything that was on the calendar for everybody out 60, 90 days, all those bookings got canceled. And since then, even before things have started kind of opening up a little bit, there's the life happens anyway, right? People are still getting divorced. People are still relocating. People still have the tree that falls on the house. They need temporary housing for a week while it gets fixed. So even right after the mid-March timeframe, as things started, getting canceled, we still were able to get a lot of activity just from the normal things that are happening anyway. But you're right about in recent, probably in the last 30 days or so, pretty much the most of the bookings that we're all experiencing are the folks that are just from being pent up and they want to do the staycations, and they're driving within 2 to 4 hours of where they live, and coming to visit family, things like that. So it has been very busy with that type of activity. And the other thing that I think from a long-term perspective that's going to play in the short-term rental's favor is the option with the hotel, right? In this environment, hotels are very struggling with how to cope with the social distancing and confirming that they're able to stand up to the cleanings that need to happen, disinfecting and things like that to make sure that everybody's safe. So, people are a lot more comfortable understanding that, a 3-bedroom home that a superhost is managing, we're putting that cleaning process through some additional steps and putting gaps in place between each guest, and being very conscious of what's required in this environment to make sure that everybody's safe.
Yeah, I can see that as well, because also not only are those steps in place, but also you're just sharing that property with your family, right? You feel pretty safe with your family. Whereas if you're at a hotel, you're sharing the hallways with everyone. You're sharing the elevators with everyone. You're sharing the checkout desk with everyone. That's a lot of chances for people to get sick from just touching things or whatnot.
Exactly.
In a single family home, it's just you and whoever. Yeah, that's really interesting. So what precautions have you guys in your portfolio, in your company, have you guys had to change and do because of the COVID?
Right. So, I mean, as it is, and you probably already, most people already know this. I mean, the whole concept of Airbnb and short-term rentals and why they've been so popular is it's more of a community feel, and so we get to review the guests. The guests have to review the host. So the cleanliness aspect of it, it was a critical part of the business to begin with, and even before COVID, our cleaning operation, the way that we describe it is everything gets touched. The walls, anything in that property, whether the people we think they touched it or not, is going to get cleaned. And when you've got some of those larger 8,000 square foot homes, it takes some time to do that. And so yeah, but we've done additional steps. For example, and we put this in our listing. We will clean all the dishes, all the utensils in the kitchen, whether they were used or not, right? So if somebody goes and grabs a fork, well, that whole thing needs to get cleaned, right? So all the remotes, all the light switches, everything gets disinfected in its entirety. We actually also use an ionizer machine, which tends to kind of do a purification of the air. And we've also started testing, similar to what they're doing in the New York subway system, the ultraviolet light. And so that's supposedly running it for like 30 minutes in a room will kill any bacteria that's in the air or on surfaces. And so we try to make sure that we've got everybody's safety in mind, right? So when the cleaners come in, that's the first thing they're going to do is put on those machines to kind of have that done first before they go into the property and get it cleaned. And so we do those additional steps. Now, it's not coming for free, so our cleaning fees are marked up probably by 30% as a result of that, and so that's a pass-through expense. So each guest has to pay that additional expense for the the additional things, the additional steps that we're taking.
You're not seeing any pushback with that, and no,
it's part of no, not at all. Yeah, I mean, if anything, I think a lot of them are appreciative that we're making, we're going overboard. We want to make sure that that there's no issues there at all.
Yeah. Now you mentioned you have one of your properties is 8,000 square feet.
Yeah.
Wow. That's just a house, or what is that?
Yeah, it's a 5-bedroom house, and it's got a pool in the backyard, a pool table, movie room. Kind of one of the higher end luxury properties that we have that we manage.
Wow. Okay. Do you ever just go there and stay just because it's?
So yeah, funny you mentioned that. But yeah, no, funny you mentioned that. So one of the things, because this is a hospitality business, before we go live on a listing, my wife and I usually stay there and kind of kick the tires, right? Yeah. Especially when it's a property that's been recently rehabbed. The last thing you want to do is have your first guest check in, and they're running for a meeting at 8 o'clock. They checked in late from a flight, and they're standing there at the shower with the water not getting hot, right? Because, oh, well, the plumber screwed up. It should be turned the other direction, right? Something simple like that. So we do a complete kind of flush through. And in most cases, before we go live, if it's not us, somebody would have stayed in the property to kind of be the guinea pig, so to speak. So we're not having the guests kind of discover those issues themselves.
That's pretty cool. Is that a perk or is that a pain to do that?
It depends on where it is, right? So that Pond City Market apartment is actually pretty cool because we can go to dinner, we go hang out, and do a date night at the same time. Or if it's like the larger luxury properties, we can hang out and have a good time as well. So it just depends.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. I think that's such a great idea. Actually, it makes perfect sense that you would do that. So of your portfolio, I think you said you own about 7 yourself. How have you guys bought and financed these? Is it just traditional financing? Or have you done anything different?
Yeah, we've through our real estate business, we have relationships with a lot of private money lenders, and most of our rehabs nowadays are done through traditional financing. So even before COVID, I think this last house we just sold, we had it under a 12-month rehab loan for 4% with one of the local banks here in town. So, which, is a big difference from hard money loans that can get in the 10, 11, 12% range. So, and then, our private money lenders are usually in the 8, 9% range. So, which is still not too bad. So a lot of the times we'll acquire the property with one of our private money lenders and then get it refinanced into a longer term loan through one of the banks that we have here in town.
Oh, so you guys kind of do kind of like a BRRRR strategy.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, because at the end of the day, right now, the only time we do rehabs, we used to do about 5 or 6 rehabs a year, and kind of flip them out. But, for me personally, that's a lot of work, right? I mean, you've got to manage the whole process and the contractors. And so we kind of moved away from the amount of rehabs that we do. The only time that we'll do it now is if we know that the end game or the exit strategy on it is a short-term rental.
Mm. Now, I'm sure a lot of people that one of the challenges that they might be scared of or might be concerned about is to furnish these places. Obviously, you have to furnish it. It's different to a traditional rental where obviously you just renovate the unit and then it's the tenant's job to furnish the unit. But with you guys obviously doing so many of them, do you guys have a set process that you do for all your properties, or is it a property by property type thing?
No, we used to do it property by property, and we used to do like a lot of estate sales and kind of discount shopping and Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist. But now, because, as we've scaled it, we've got relationships with a couple of staging companies, and a lot of it's turnkey. We kind of know exactly what our property checklist is ahead of time of what we need to get, and it's usually like a 2 to 3 week window from start to finish. And we do some kind of customization depending on the project, but a lot of it's kind of streamlined. We get everything, all the large furniture items, for example, will get done within a couple of days, and then all the supplies and everything come shortly thereafter. So, I mean, my wife used to love going to the estate sales and getting the bargains, and it kind of reminded us of the tax lien days. We'd go in with our strategy before they open the door and kind of strategically go after which ones we want. and we used to have fun with that. But because of the scale, I mean, when you're doing one a month, you can kind of do it that way. But we've had some months where we've gone live with 4 to 5 units and within a 30 to 45 day window. And when you're kind of doing that kind of volume, you've got to be able to do it in a much larger scale than one-offs like that.
Yeah. What's been some mistakes you made in furnishing some of these properties?
Well, it's actually that's all Marva's department, right? So I don't know what colors look good with what colors. So I'd have to ask her that question if she thinks it's, I mean, she always does a great job, and we always get complimented on the listing pictures afterwards. But I'm sure she probably has some things that she's learned along the way. I mean, we start out with some pretty simple, standardized things that help. You always want to do a queen size sleeper sofa, for example. You always want to do queen beds throughout the property for the obvious reason, right? So your cleaner shows up and you've got a king and 2 twins and full, and she's they spend half the day figuring out what sheet goes where. No, just everything's the same size. And so, we standardize from the beginning a lot of the methods of what we do. And, so from that standpoint, I think that's kind of the end game. You want to maximize the number of people you can sleep in each location, and standardize it so that your operation can be, very, very productive that way.
Yeah, that's something I never have thought of. I would have had a single bed, a double bed, a king bed, a California king.
Yeah, and we find that. So we work with investors that approach us when they're like halfway through it, they're like half pregnant with it, and we do a walkthrough, and that's the first thing wow, you got 2 twins here, you got a full, you got a king, and they're thinking, oh yeah, there's going to be options. The families will love it. I'm like, no. So yeah, I mean, traditionally, in traditional sense, you'd think that would make it, but yeah, it's little things like that you can kind of plan ahead of time to make the operation run smoothly.
Yeah. I'm sure you guys have got some great systems in place as well. What systems do you guys have in place for cleaning? What systems do you guys have in place for letting the tenants letting the guests in, and how they leave and stuff like that?
Yeah, so it's pretty much everything is with technology. Most of our homes are smart homes, so we have electronic locks. Mm-hmm. We have smart thermostats. In the homes that we have cameras, we have the Ring cameras, and it's all through one system that does it synchronizes everything on one platform. But the check-in process is actually pretty smooth because the electronic code that's assigned to each guest only works for their time that they're checking in and the time that they check out. So from a security standpoint, those codes are constantly changing. Then we have a constant code for the cleaners and maintenance crew as well, to kind of track who's coming and going. But it's all kind of done electronically. We use a couple of different channel managers to do automatic messaging and texting to the cleaning staff, so that they know, when people are coming and going, and when we need to have cleanings done. And so that's done, in kind of in the background with our system. We also do noise detection devices that kind of measure the level of sound that help us be proactive, especially in some of the multi-unit buildings where like I mentioned earlier, the older buildings, with the old wood flooring, the tenant below can hear you just walking normally. So if you've got a bunch of people up there jumping around or dancing or something, it's a problem, right? So all of our listings, we don't allow any parties or events, and we make it clear that there's a quiet time from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. And we can actually be proactive, not wait for our neighbor to complain. We'll get a text notification if noise level goes above a certain number, and be able to, tap the guest on the shoulder. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. Just want to check with you what's going on. There's loud music playing or whatever the situation is, and kind of helps us be proactive that way. So technology is pretty helpful with this business as well.
Wow, I've never heard of that before either. That's really cool. So it's just something that detects the level of the noise, and then if it gets past a certain level, you guys get a text message or some kind of notification of that.
Right. So you can set it at different thresholds. So it can differentiate if there's more than 5 people in a room speaking, if the TV is on, or if there's a loud speaker that's playing, and you can kind of set the different levels. It also does it for outdoors too. So some of our properties that have pools, that comes in handy, to kind of monitor that. It's one thing to have a camera and have the outdoor camera kind of surveilling the property, but the noise detection is a good tool to kind of add to the process so that you can have more information to make decisions on.
Yeah. Do any of the guests complain about that? Do they feel like they're being spied on or something like that?
No, not really. I mean, some of them complain about the camera. So we actually had at the 8,000 square foot house with the pool, we had a guest that before they booked, he's like, yeah, my new wife and I were going on our anniversary trip, and I'm a little bit concerned about the cameras you have in the backyard and the pool. I'm not comfortable you watching my wife. And so we have to explain to them, look, it's there for security purposes. It's there for insurance purposes. We don't have somebody there 24/7 looking at the camera. So occasionally we do have people ask about it, but at the end of the day, it's something that I think everybody understands. And obviously we're not doing cameras inside the property, right? So it's just the outdoor surveillance that's good to have.
Why not? No, I'm just joking. I think that's a different TV show, right? It's
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm not. There have been some Airbnb hosts that have gotten in trouble for doing that, but yeah. So, and I think there's some hosts that feel like they have the right to do it in common space or common areas like kitchen or living room or something like that. But I think Airbnb's policy is pretty clear that you should only be doing it on outdoor surveillance.
Yeah, that's obviously very understandable.
Yeah.
No, obviously you mentioned as well that you guys have the management firm, an Airbnb management firm. How do you guys work with tenants on that? How do tenants, on landlords and owners with that? How does that process work?
So in terms of how we approach a landlord to work that out?
No. What say I come to you. I have a property. It's vacant right now. I had a long-term tenant in there, but I want to turn it into. Would this be a classic scenario? Would this be a general scenario that happens a lot, or does it vary? Maybe let's go with that, right? I have a property that was a 3-bedroom house that I had a tenant in, but now they've moved out. I want to turn it into an Airbnb, and I come to you guys. How do you guys work with someone like that?
Right. So the first thing we'll do is a market analysis, and because we want to confirm, for the owner. That in some cases it might be more profitable to do a regular rental. It just depends on the area. There are some pockets in any market where the monthly rent amount commands a premium because of where it's located and things like that. So The first thing we want to do is do a market analysis. We'll look at comps in the area of other folks that are already doing short-term rentals and what their nightly rate is and what their occupancy is. Then we'll come up with a 12-month forecast that looks at the net number after expenses, after your insurance, your utilities, all your monthly expenses. And then we also, if we are approaching it as kind of a management structure, we can show after our management fees what that net back is to the owner. And then we just do simple math to compare, well, we're going to be $5,000 more profitable after expenses if you went short-term rental route instead of the traditional 12-month lease. And so that's kind of the first step. Once we've determined that there's definite benefit to do a short-term rental, then we can provide more of a analysis on like a 3-bedroom. Your staging cost is probably going to be around $9,000 to get started, right? So you have a period of time that you're going to get, as the owner, paying for that to get that money returned to them, so they can kind of figure out, is it going to make sense for them to shift over into that option. And then from there, or alternatively, if it's not a management structure, it would simply just be a lease. So on a 3-bedroom home, maybe we're going to lease it from them for $1,600 a month, and then we do the same analysis to see what's that net back going to be from a rental arbitrage standpoint. And typically, we usually look at in between the $800 to $1,500 range for it to make sense, because there are going to be cases where it's lower than that, and it could be a $400 difference or a $300 difference. And when you start getting that tight, any alter change in occupancy or the nightly rate can, all of a sudden you're just kind of breaking even. So you want to kind of watch that those numbers are spread apart enough. So those are, for us, that's really the way we approach it. It's really those two different options when you're talking to a landlord or an owner. Is either we're going to manage it and they'll upfront all the expenses, or we'll do a traditional lease with the landlord if they don't really want to explore the option of going, kind of being more strategic with it.
So you're saying the arbitrage, you should expect an $800 profit essentially from what you're paying. Okay.
At a minimum, on the larger properties, the spread's going to be higher than that. Wow. But at a minimum, on some of the smaller properties, it's going to be.
That it makes a lot of sense. I can see why a lot of landlords would do that without, having the headache of having to run a business. Essentially, you can just hand it off to someone. And I think you can talk maybe a little bit more, but sometimes something that's misunderstood is that if you have Airbnb, a lot of times it's actually better than having a long-term tenant in terms of taking care of the property, because they're going to take care of that place so much better, because it goes by ratings, right? You're going to have a tenant in there. Once they're in there, they don't care. They're going to bang the walls. They're going to do whatever. But you as a host, you want the place looking immaculate.
That's absolutely right. And like we've talked about, it's professionally cleaned, 3 to 4 times a month. Not only is it cleaned 3 to 4 times a month, but it's the cleaners also do a detailed inspection. So any little thing that's off kilter or broken that needs to be fixed gets addressed right then. And so you're absolutely right. You can look at a property in a parallel universe that's been on Airbnb for 4 years or been through one tenant for 4 years, and it's going to be a huge 9-day difference in terms of the Airbnb might have a couple scuffs from the luggage, like you might have to do some touch-up paint, but that's about it, for the most part. So the properties stay in much better shape. The kitchens in most cases aren't used as much. People that are traveling, they're going to be eating out, and they don't use the kitchens and appliances as much as well. So there's not as much wear and tear on the property from that standpoint.
Yeah. Because I always hear people saying, I don't want 20 people walking through my property a month or whatever, but I think they miss the points that you were just talking about. What do you think are some other misconceptions that people have about Airbnb?
Well, it's the party houses, right? All the negative press that you hear about short-term rentals, unfortunately, and we haven't touched on this yet, but it's also a key component when you're looking at your market analysis, is the legislative front. Because this is new in a lot of cities and a lot of counties, everybody's still trying to figure out the rules. And when the planning commissioner is having a meeting, and the first time they hear about short-term rentals is the neighbors that are standing up and complaining about the one guy that's throwing all the wild parties and all the cars are coming in there and making a bunch of noise and disturbing the neighborhood. And, so that's usually, unfortunately, where the lawmakers start figuring out what rules they should be putting in place for short-term rentals. And it's like any other industry, right? You have some of the bad apples that are doing things that they shouldn't be doing that cause the problem. I'm also a board member of a statewide association called STROAGA, the Short-Term Rental Owners Association of Georgia, and we have a dedicated lobbyist effort that is more of kind of like an educational grassroots effort to make sure that we talk about all the positive things that the short-term rental industry brings, and not only to the neighborhood, but to the community as a whole. There are some cities in Atlanta, for example, College Park, Peachtree Corners, that have outright banned short-term rentals. Knee-jerk reaction, right? Just from the people complaining, so they're not allowing it in their town. However, what the unintended consequence there is, as an investor going into that city, if I don't have short-term rentals as an option to liquidate or make revenue, then I'm going to go look at the city next door that gives me that option. And so it's going to diminish the ability for development and for properties to get rehabbed and such because of that. So we all the time, and it doesn't matter where you are in the United States, there's going to be some legislative issues and ordinances to contend with. So as an investor, make sure that that's on very high on your checklist before you start going too far down that road. There are some municipalities that have been quite reasonable and put laws in place, and it's in their best interest because they're basically going to be making tax revenue off of it. As big as the city of Atlanta is, they haven't clearly defined yet what those rules are for short-term rentals. However, we are participating in some of those discussions so that it's very simple. You can have like a registration process. So the neighbors know that you are doing short-term rentals, who the owner is and their contact information, or who the property manager is and their contact information. So there's some very logical things that you can put in place that make sense for everybody. And then of course, if there are, to kind of weed out the bad operators, if there's some counties that have, if you have more than 3 complaints or issues that come up, you can get suspended from being able to list that property, which again is reasonable. Makes sense, right? If you're doing things you shouldn't be doing. So it's just a challenge to kind of make sure, there's major cities like Chicago and New York and San Francisco that have put in, very strict regulations that have made it difficult to have some of those short-term rental operators do business.
Yeah, well, I know here in Vegas, I think it's probably for a different reason out here in Vegas, but for the most part in Las Vegas itself, there's 2 areas. There's Las Vegas and there's Henderson. I think you've been out here, so you kind of know that yourself. But Las Vegas itself, for the most part, Airbnb is banned, or it's really, really hard and costly to kind of be successful. And I think that's more to do with the casinos and the hotel industry than anything else. The mafia, probably the mob, kind of got involved.
You don't want to impact something that's been there that long and that's successful. So that'll be an uphill battle to try to get something done over there for sure.
Yeah, I don't think they'll win that. But there was people out here, friends that I knew, that were buying these houses at list price or above list price, putting 100,000 into making them an amazing house. And while it was good, it was justified because they were making these huge houses into 10, 15 bedroom Airbnbs, and they were making a killing, and then overnight they just got shut down, and they had like 4 or 5 of these houses and they just lost everything. It's just but I think that's a lesson into before, not to keep it too long, but you guys to try and see if the property will sustain itself via traditional rental, or do you guys?
So we talked a little earlier about financing and acquiring the property. So most traditional lenders, even in the hard money space, and traditional rental loans for rental properties, most lenders are still not recognizing, or still will not recognize, the short-term rental revenue. So you do have to, from an underwriting standpoint, hang your hat on a traditional rental number as kind of, this is what it's going to do as a worst case scenario. But there are actually some lenders that I'm currently working with that are starting to at least make some exceptions to considering the short-term rental revenue by, for example, if you've got 12 months historical data on that property, then they'll use that, as a forecast for underwriting. So they're starting to kind of come around and treat it as, something that's worth looking at, because even though it's not a fixed number, but if you're consistent and you're above a certain occupancy level, then, it's usually something I think eventually they'll be able to get comfortable with.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. So as this show is called Wrestling with Real Estate, there's a little section I like to do at the end that's a wrestling themed question, but they're essentially real estate questions. So the first one is, what would your wrestling name be? If you had to come up with a wrestling name.
A wrestling name? Yeah. What was yours again?
Mason Ryan. So mine was nothing. Mine was pretty boring, to be honest with you. They were going through a phase where they wanted everyone to have a normal name. So I like Hulk Hogan or Ultimate Warrior or Jake the Snake. I like those names a lot more, but yeah.
Right. Well, the only thing I could really think of, growing up in New York, they used to call me Rich Love.
Okay, that works.
I don't know if that's a good or bad thing with
You're married, so I won't dive into that one too much.
Right.
Each wrestler has a special move. So when they're in the ring, they have a special move that they can do. What is your special move in real estate? Or what is your strength?
Yeah, so I think my strength is being able to, look and do some analytics on short-term rentals as far as a model goes, and be very precise because of our history and our track record with different, we're kind of spread out all over Atlanta metro area. So there's a lot of different pockets of neighborhoods that we know. So, there's a lot of different systems similar to comparative market analysis in general real estate, tools that can help you do an analysis. But if you don't have that direct on the ground experience, it's difficult to know for sure, especially when you've got so many different moving pieces with short-term rentals. So I would say, the analytics and doing market analysis is a strength.
Yeah. And just to plug into that, as you're talking about the whole management aspect of things, I think what you guys offer, you're not paying me to plug you guys or anything, but I think it's such an amazing, it can be such an amazing partnership, right? It's because it's a partnership, right? Someone who's looking to do an Airbnb, it's going to be lucrative because you guys have done the analysis from, okay, it's analysis and it's not 100%, but for them to then not have to learn the hard lessons, right? Like probably you guys had to, and to be able to leverage what you guys have learned and the experience that you guys have, they might be actually making the same as if they were running it themselves, because they're going to make more mistakes. They're not going to get to superhost as quickly. They're going to have higher vacancy, lower occupancy, and maybe not be able to charge as much as well. So,
no, that's a great point, Barry, because we haven't touched on this much, but make no mistake about it. This is a hospitality business. It's not like you throw a tenant in there and you walk away. We've got handymen that are on call that, somebody's there staying for 5 nights and the AC goes out. You can't tell them, oh, we'll be there on Monday. No, you've got to be there within a few hours. So yes, you do have to have that hospitality and that 5-star review on point, or your listing is going to be tanked very quickly. And that's a key part of it. So we didn't really touch on it, but it's, it's a lot of heavy lifting to make sure that you are able to get the good guest reviews. And it is definitely a hospitality business at the end of the day.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So what's been the biggest body slam you've taken in your real estate career?
Biggest body slam, I would say, in our tax lien business, we had, and we did a lot of properties in Savannah. And we had these 2 row homes that were fairly close in neighborhoods to each other that, typically with a tax lien, I won't drag this out too long, but typically with a tax lien, you do your due diligence before you go to the auction, right? So you want to make sure that what you're bidding on, you may end up with it. Mm-hmm. So you want to make sure that the property's there and kind of what's going on. So we did that on these 2 properties and waited the 12-month redemption period. And, after the 12-month redemption period, we send out our notices to the prior owner, and the attorney starts doing his work. And we do another, due diligence drive-by to make sure that the property's there. And we had these 2 properties in Savannah that basically was on the city demo list, right? So now we owned, two lots of land that we thought were going to be two houses. So that was a pretty bad body slam, especially when you've got all that time and energy invested in something to find out that it's not what you originally thought it was.
Yeah. Cool. So was there a moment that you were standing on the top rope, getting ready to jump in the ring, and you were scared? What was it, and how did you overcome it?
That's a good one. I think with real estate, there's so many moving pieces, right? And, especially in the rehab space, it just takes one little misstep, whether it's the time it takes to do it or something that you missed in the rehab. So I can't point to one particular instance, but when you put your offer in to buy that house and you have certain assumptions in it, there's through experience, you're going to have things that get missed. Like we have to replace a full driveway. That's another $5,000. Well, that $5,000 starts eating into the profit. So there's things like that are pretty scary, that are unknown. Structural engineering issues with homes that can cost, another $8,000 or $9,000 that you didn't account for. And, so those would be the times that, that you kind of take a step back and say, okay, well, I have to keep rolling, keep rolling with the punches, right? So, that would be the times that have been tough.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's just one of those things that you have to accept in real estate. You can't know everything, right? And some things are going to pop up, it's part of the business, right? It's part of what we do, and we have a choice, right? We can be in real estate or we can't, right? And take the risk. I would much rather be in real estate, to be honest with you.
Absolutely, I agree totally as well.
Cool. Well, thank you for sharing so much information today. I've kept you again. I apologize to everyone because I keep them way longer than I should. I promise. Before we go.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I'm glad you invited me. I had fun today. Thanks for having me.
Me too. It's been really interesting for me. I've always been interested in short-term rentals, and I think it's a great business, and it's just going to keep growing. I think there's a need for it, and that need will continue. I think, and as long as that's there, you're always going to have a great business. So before we go, maybe do you want to tell people how they can get a hold of you? If they, maybe they're looking for someone to manage their Airbnb, or someone to maybe lease their property to, that's going to, get that arbitrage, and how they can get a hold of you.
Absolutely, sure. So my direct cell number is 770-540-7638. 770-540-7638. My Facebook page is Diamond Edge Short-Term Rentals. And then if you're also doing short-term rentals, we have our Facebook group that's called Atlanta Short-Term Rental Investors. And so we do a lot of monthly webinars, and we talk about best practices and things that are going on in the industry. So join that group as well. And so you can kind of keep updated if you're interested in doing short-term rentals in Atlanta. And text me if you're interested in getting a property analyzed, or if you need some help, second set of eyes looking at a property. We'd be happy to help you out with it.
Cool. Well, thank you for being on the show today. Thank you for giving your time. I really appreciate you sharing a lot of great information today, and I think it's really valuable for a lot of people, myself included. So
my pleasure, Barry. It was great meeting you.
Thank you for wrestling with real estate.
Thank you.